Hey, hello there, this is Michael from Make It WordPress and I'm on the quest to find the best of WordPress. Today I'm going to dive into a very interesting topic that is also highly debated on the net, namely Nginx versus LiteSpeed. These are both web servers that can run WordPress and can run WordPress really well, but which ones is the best in performance? There are a lot of blog posts indicating that LiteSpeed is so much better than Nginx, but is it really true? In this video, I will run some benchmarks in a similar setup and see how they compare. Let's start with a small introduction of what Nginx and LiteSpeed is. And in this case, in this benchmark, I'm going to do my test with OpenLiteSpeed, which is the open source version of LiteSpeed, which usually comes with a paid license. So Nginx is a reverse proxy and HTTP server. Basically, it's a kind of software that allows you to run a web server on any server you own, on any computer connected to the internet. And as such, it can also load and serve WordPress. Nginx is widely popular and used by the largest companies such as Dropbox, Netflix, and also interesting WordPress.com. Then we have OpenLiteSpeed, which is also a web server, an HTTP server that can, like Nginx, serve WordPress and other applications. It is quite popular in shared hosting companies. Also, LiteSpeed itself is quite popular in large hosting companies. Companies such as Hostinger and A2 Hosting use LiteSpeed because it is said that it will reduce the CPU and memory overhead a lot and offers a lot of performance. So in this video, we're going to see how it actually scales up. So what I did before the benchmark is that I created two identical WordPress websites, which are just the basic 2022 theme for OpenLiteSpeed and Nginx, and I used RunCloud to create these sites. RunCloud is a very useful control panel that allows you to manage web applications and servers. As a server provider, I use Upcloud, which is a great provider of cloud servers, storage, and such. And I choose the exact same setup for both of the websites. For each website, I set up a separate server, which is a server with 2 cores and 4 gigs of RAM, and the server is placed in London. So LiteSpeed is using a plugin which is called LiteSpeed Cache in WordPress, which is a great plugin that allows you to do almost any optimization in WordPress, any performance optimization in WordPress just in one plugin. And for the Nginx install, I used RunCloud Hub, which is the plugin developed by RunCloud to manage the caching of Nginx. So in the setup, I'm going to test both the cache performance and the uncached performance. And it's really important to test both performances because it also says a lot about the performance of the stack. And you're probably already familiar with caching, but in essence, it's serving a static copy of a dynamic generated page on a server, and usually a cached version of a website loads much faster and can handle a lot more visitors. So we'll see in this upcoming benchmark if that is true. So this is the basic of the setup, and we're going to do some WordPress related benchmark, do some loading with H2Load, which is a load testing tool that you can also install on a server. And for that, I created a separate server that we are going to use later to use H2Load. And I'm also going to do some simple load testing with the jQuery performance tool. So enough of the introduction and talk. Let's start with testing the time to first byte and initial load time. So this is the load time tester from jQuery, and it tests your website from several locations of the world. And let's see how Nginx and OLS compare. And let's also get Nginx. So there we are. We couldn't test from every location. Sometimes that happens with the load time tester. Nevertheless, with OpenLiteSpeed, we have a very nice first byte time of just 22 milliseconds, and also a neat average response time of 370 seconds for the time to first byte, and I think this is a pretty good score. If you compare this to Nginx, you see it's just a little bit higher, but it's a very tiny margin. Only 7 milliseconds for the first byte from London, and it makes sense that this value is the lowest because our server is also in London. So the further the testing location is away, in this case, the longer the time the first byte will be. And if you look to the average scores, it's very similar as well. So both the total loading time and the first byte are really close, are in a close range. So there's no really significant difference in there. So this, again, this test just says how fast the website will load, but doesn't say how well the website will perform if you have a lot of visitors or if you do any heavy actions on the side of the server. So let's just run some WordPress related benchmarks and see how both compare. So the first WordPress benchmark I'm going to run is the WP Performance Tester benchmark. And this is this plugin is created by a well-known WordPress reviewer who each year, named Kevin Ohashi, who each year has this famous benchmarks. You may know him. It's a useful plugin that gives some indication about the speed of your server and how many queries it can handle. So let's do some performance testing for our OpenLiteSpeed setup. And in a similar fashion, we are going to do this for Nginx. So it's going to be interesting. The results are already in for OLS. And well, we have a service score of 8.9, which is good. And also the WordPress performance benchmark resulted in almost 1500 queries per second, which is, I think, a really great score. It's a pretty fast site. I did a lot of these benchmarks for a lot of hosting companies and servers, and this is a good score. Again, what will Nginx do? Well, the total time is 9 seconds in this test. Do you remember, compared to 8.9, so this is slightly slower, and our WordPress performance benchmark has 1652 queries per second for an execution time of 0605 for Nginx. And again, this is very close to OpenLiteSpeed, so not really a performance difference in there. So let's move to our second test, which is using the WordPress hosting benchmark tool from Anton Alexandrov. And this test is more elaborate benchmarks, which tests on several metrics, such as the processing of large data, binary dating, the performance of the disks, and also the performance of queries. Now, the server you have has a lot of influence on this, but so the actual physical or virtual server, so the hardware, so to say, has a lot of influence on it, but the software as well. And will OpenLiteSpeed will OpenLiteSpeed be faster than Nginx in this case? So let's run this benchmark and see out what the difference are. Just have to accept the terms, and let's start benchmarking, and a similar we're going to do this for Nginx. I will going back to the OpenLiteSpeed environment. So we're now benchmarking. This will take a couple of seconds, so I will just speed this video up and see you in a moment. All right, so in the meantime, we're done benchmarking and these are the results. I just stacked the two windows next to each other so we can more easily compare the results. And this is again very interesting. I'm almost going to have some doubts whether the one installation really running OpenLiteSpeed and the other one is really running Nginx, but they do because the results again are very similar. Nginx is slightly faster for operations with large text data according to this benchmark. The file system is kind of similar, which makes sense because we're using the exact same server setup. And again, for the database performance is very similar as well. And obviously a network is also doing very similar because again, we're using the same server provider and the same server setup. So there's not really a clear winner in here. So we're also prepared another test where I'm going to insert 10,000 posts and see how much time it takes. For this, I've wrote a custom script which will output the time directly here on the screen after inserting. So let's see what the differences are. And I will do the same for Nginx. As you can see, this takes some time to insert. All right, so the test is finished. We got a very interesting 404 in here, but still we see the time output in here, and this is actually the time in milliseconds. And for OpenLiteSpeed, we performed the insertion of all these draft posts. These are 10,000 posts in around 35 seconds. And for Nginx, we also did it in 35 seconds, 35,6 seconds to be precise. So this is the time in milliseconds. So LiteSpeed is just a very tiny margin faster in here, but it's not really a difference. So the second test is actually doing a query over all these 10,000 posts and again see how long it takes. And well, for LiteSpeed this takes 380 milliseconds, and for Nginx it takes 371 milliseconds. And I'm sorry, this test is really ugly. I didn't take the effort to make it look somewhat nicer, but it still gives the result, so you can see. So let's see how deletion is doing. For this, we can do another thing. And again, this is a test I customly wrote, very simple test. So this won't work in a regular WordPress installation. I added some custom script for it. All right, so the results are in, and again, it's really similar. OpenLiteSpeed is just slightly faster, having deleted all the 10,000 posts in 36 seconds. And for Nginx, it completed the whole thing in 36.6 seconds. So again, very close, no real winner. So the last test we're going to do, which I think is the most interesting, is going to use how to load. And how to load is a benchmarking tool for HTTP2 requests. Basically, we can benchmark how fast a page will load by firing up a lot of requests to this page. So what we can do, we can do this load testing from another server, and this server will make a lot of requests to our destination server, and we can see how well it does. And for that, I'm going to log into another server. In fact, I already logged in, and I'm here in my command line, and I'm going to install the client for performing how to load. And for this, I need to paste a command sudo apt install ngHTTP to client. So the client has now been installed, and now we're actually already ready to do our benchmarks. It's that easy to install htload. If you have a bit of experience with logging in to a server, you can also easily do this yourself. And what we're going to do now is perform the actual benchmark. And let's start with benchmarking our cached pages. So caching is turned on for both OpenLiteSpeed. We have this LiteSpeed cache plugin in here, and caching is turned on. And again, for Nginx, we also have the Cloud Hub plugin, and caching is turned on as well. So let's see what the actual results are. And we can do this easily by executing the following command, which basically says execute 10,000 requests with 100 clients, which can at a max have 10 concurrent streams at once. So let's see what happens if we're going to head up our OpenLiteSpeed server. And there we are. The benchmark is executed and it's finished. And these are the most interesting figures. We can see the benchmark is finished in almost 5 seconds, and we had around 2,000 requests per second, transferring around 107 MBs per second. And I think this is really a great score. It means your server can handle 2,000 requests a second, which is a great figure for WordPress. Now, how will Nginx compare to OpenLiteSpeed? Is Nginx caching, which is fast CGI caching, better or worse than the caching provided by LiteSpeed? For this, we are going to paste the same command, but then a different endpoint. Basically, our installation Nginx, which I placed on a subdomain of my own website. Let's hit the same benchmark again. And we're done. And again, we have to look to these figures. It finished in over 5 seconds with basically 2,000, almost 2,000 requests per second, and having a throughput of more than 100 MBs per second. So LiteSpeed is doing slightly better, but again, only by a minor difference. What is interesting though is that we can see that LiteSpeed also has some slightly better time to first byte and to connections. So it seems that it can start up the website somewhat quicker, and while the difference is not really that big, in a range of around 1,000 milliseconds, it can make a lot of difference in how fast the website is perceived. So OpenLiteSpeed is actually doing better in here. Now, the interesting part is also how well does a website do when caching is turned off, because there are a lot of situations when you cannot use caching. For imagine if you're using a web shop, you cannot cache all these pages. If you cache a web shop, it means that visitors can see the cart of anyone, which is obviously not a desired behavior, because the shopping cart will also be put in the cache. So that's a very realistic scenario for that. So for that, I will be turning off the cache in OpenLiteSpeed. And also in Nginx, we have the setting that if we add a query parameter to our URL, it actually won't apply caching. So we can very easily test the same website with caching turned off, because a website without caching is performing a lot worse. We'll be doing the load test with fewer requests and fewer clients. Whoops, and let's just delete this. So let's paste in the command and just briefly explain what it does. So in this case, we are firing 1,000 requests for 10 clients with which can have 10 streams at the max. And we are starting with the OpenLiteSpeed OLS environment. And there we are. And as you can see, the test is already running a lot slower than our cached version. And you can already see the power of caching and how much faster it makes your website. And our test is finally done, and it took a lot longer. It took 20 times longer. So with caching turned off, we could only have around 26 requests per second, and the whole test completed in 38 seconds with an throughput of around 1.38 MBs per second, which is a very low score. And we also see that our times to first byte are a lot higher than it used to be in the previous test in here, as you can see. So the difference is substantial. But again, we're now going to see how Nginx is actually performing in this test. Alright, so for Nginx, we will just do the same test, but then at a different endpoint. Yeah, this is the test we're going to do. So it's similar as the test we did, but then we're directing it at our Nginx server. And again, as you can see, this test is going to run a lot slower than the cached version of the test. We're almost done. Stay with me, stay with me. All right, so Nginx is finished, and this is a really interesting thing because we did a couple of benchmarks and we didn't really see a significant difference, but in this test, there is a significant difference. The difference is really large in H2Load. And it's interesting because H2Load is used a lot in these blog posts about LiteSpeed as a benchmark, and usually it's in the favor of LiteSpeed, but in this case it seems that Nginx performs a lot better because the whole test finished in around 24 seconds with 30 requests per second, and again a throughput of around 2 MBs per second. And this is actually a lot better than the figure here from OpenLiteSpeed. And I also did some other benchmarks, for example, with loader.io, and you can see these benchmarks. You can view this benchmark in the article that's also linked underneath this video. And I have similar results, that when you turn caching off and you put a lot of users on the website, a lot of requests on the website, Nginx is going to deliver the website faster, a lot faster. This is really a big margin. So in this case, Nginx is clearly a winner with also much better times for the first byte connection. So these benchmarks conclude our whole suite of testing. I hope this gave you some insight. I think both of these web servers have their clear advantages. With OpenLiteSpeed, you can also use .htaccess, which is used a lot by Apache. And OpenLiteSpeed also has the LiteSpeed cache plugin, which I think is one of the greatest caching plugins for WordPress, with a lot of options. For caching, having a CDN, image optimization, page optimization, like minifying scripts. Also, at site includes, which is partial caching for logged-in users. So I think this is a great plugin. This is a great advantage of LiteSpeed. There's not really such a good caching plugin for Nginx available. Having said that, I think they're performing really similar, Nginx and OpenLiteSpeed, except for the test where caching is turned off and we are firing up a lot of requests and concurrent users on the server. In that case, Nginx is doing a lot better, as we saw in these figures and these figures. Thank you for watching this video. I hope this will help you to make a decision between LiteSpeed or Nginx. If you have any questions or reactions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. There's also an article link to it in which you can find some more benchmarks I did. And for the rest, make an amazing day out of it and let's get the best of WordPress.